About everything there was until I went to a yard sale. You can buy weird things there where I got a flashlight that will also break a car window. If you ever need a flashlight to do that. Okay, we're in Genesis chapter 12. Chapter 12. Genesis is divided basically into two sections, 1 through 11, where we start with creation and go through the times of the I'll call them the first patriarchs and the old timer guys, and then and also the population explosion and dispersion. Then chapter 12 through the end of the book of Genesis, we have Abraham and Abraham's descendants. And a large part of that, taking up the descendants of Abraham, is with Joseph. But that would take us through chapter 50, which is the end of Genesis. But for now, we have the descendants of Abraham. Abram and his seed that he was promised. We have taken Abram and with Terah and the small family that they have there, although I'm not sure the size of it. It sounded like there were several of them, especially after a bit. Anyway, with Terah and this group, including Abram and Sarai, they left Ur of the Chaldees and they went to Haran. All right, so now it takes up chapter 12, verse 1. Now the Lord said to Abram, "Go forth from your country and from your relatives and from your father's house to the land that I will show you. And I will make you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great. And so you shall be a blessing, and I will bless those who bless you, and the ones who curses you I will curse. And all in you, all the families of the earth will be blessed." So, how many calls did Abram get? And you'll have to forgive me if I use both names and correct myself a lot. Same guy, so, all right. Anyway, how many calls did he get? Some think 1, and that was what we just read. And some think 2, because of what they read in Acts chapter 7 and about verses 2 through 4, where it says, God called him out of Ur. And this says that this was a call out of Haran. So anyway, Abram was called and went with the family. And let me, now I'm not going to back up and read all the. It's confusing who was related to who and who married who, and was it bad enough that somebody got to be his own grandpa? I don't think so that bad, but still there was it does get involved. So now we have Abram. Go forth from your country, from your relatives. Why? Well, the relatives were idol worshipers in a land of idol worshipers. And so God, to get Abram on the path that God had assigned to Abram, or at least set out for him to fill in his life, he said, you've got to leave your country, you got to leave your relatives, you're going to have to leave your father's house. He hadn't. By the time God got Abram on his way to Canaan from Haran, the father was gone. And the very last verse of chapter 11 is the days of Terah, this Abraham's father, were 205 years, and Terah died in Haran. So there's that. You've got to get out of your father's house, and you're going to go to a place I'll show you. I've been on roads that I thought I knew where they went, and that's a comfort. I've been on roads I did not know where they went. Usually, I was, the times I can remember when I absolutely did not know where a road went, I was hunting. And ended up, I was not hunting what I set out to hunt, like something that pranced through the woods with long horns. But I was hunting any place, so I'd know where I was. And that's a different feeling altogether. I was in a 1952 Hudson, out in the woods, where it was a bad road. Now, 1952 Hudsons weren't noted for their road clearance. And I got into some areas where, okay, have you ever heard the term, okay, you're committed? You can't go back. You're committed. Pilots know about that. And there you go. And long story short, after the Hudson and I forded a river and other things, we made it. Obviously, because here I am. Anyway, to a land which I will show you takes faith. And the Bible talks about the faith of Abraham. And when you get out from what you know and go where you don't even know what God has in mind, this is an act of faith. And I'll make you a great nation. I'll bless you. I'll make your name great. You'll be a blessing to everybody in the whole wide world. Your family will really do this. So, verse 4, so Abram went forth as the Lord had spoken to him, and Lot went with him. Lot was a lot of trouble. He caused Abraham headaches. And Abram was real good one time, and you think Abram was really willing to share and so forth. Well, Lot, if you go this way, I'll go that way. And you take your pick first, you get the first choice, and if you go that way, I'll go this way. And Lot made his choice and took off. And Abraham went, I'm sure. Trouble among the sheep herders and kinsmen in this is a pretty big outfit by this time. But when Lot left, I think things calmed down somewhat. It looks like that as you just read through the story without trying to do any rabbit trails. It looks like that. And Abram even had to go rescue Lot and his crowd one time from a problem. So Lot went with him. Now Abram was 75 years old when he departed from Haran. And he had lived a couple of years in Haran after they left Ur. So they're on their way. So here's the troop that's going. But they've got time they make their first stop that was of any time and could really put up a camp and maybe stay, I don't know how long, but enough they felt like they rested. It was going to be about 500 miles. But here we have Abram took Sarai, his wife, and Lot, his nephew, and all their possessions, which they had accumulated. I don't know how much, but I do know that if you're in a place at least 2 years, and there's quite a few of you and so on, you can accumulate some stuff, especially if you're going to have to transport it and you don't have a truck. You have to do it more the hard way. So we have the possessions which they had accumulated, and now this one. And the persons which they had acquired in Haran. Servants. We're going to get snatches and bits of information that shows that Abram was a wealthy man. He had some donations to the cause along the way, we'll see. But he was a man of means. And here he has souls, persons that had been acquired in Haran. And now with these acquisitions, this is accumulated stuff and people, and they set out for the land of Canaan. Thus, they came to the land of Canaan. Abram passed through the land as far as the site of Shechem, to the oaks of Moreh. Now the Canaanite was then in the land. So, a place and a comment and an aside. The place around Shechem, the oaks of Moreh, this is pretty close to the Sea of Galilee. Maybe, of course, it's west because it's Canaan. And just a tiny bit south, but that far north. That's where they first stopped. And then this aside comment, and that should alert us, the Canaanites were in the land. Okay, well, what would that mean? Well, if you read the rest of the Old Testament, you'll know that Abraham's descendants had trouble from these Canaanites' descendants, and had God's orders, take them out of the land completely to a person. That was the order that God gave them. They didn't do it, and it continued to cause them trouble. But for now the Canaanite was then in the land. And we mentioned, I think it was last week, about in certain peoples were going in different places, and the ones that went to Canaan were the ites, the Girgashites and the Hivites and Hittites and the ites and all of those people. They were there. That's them. The Lord appeared to Abram and said, to your descendants I will give this land. So he, Abram, built an altar there to the Lord who had appeared to him. Then he proceeded from there to the mountain on the east of Bethel and pitched his tent, with Bethel on the west and Ai on the east. And there he built an altar to the Lord and called upon the name of the Lord. Abram journeyed on, continuing toward the Negev. So what he's saying through here, simply, that he landed, first of all, up there at Shechem, and now he's working his way south. And not quickly, but bit by bit. And understand he's not at liberty to just up and go. And, okay, folks, we're going to go, and let's be out of here. Got an hour, we'll be gone. He had a lot of people. He had flocks and herds, and he had things that they had acquired. So let's get gathered up here, and maybe by next week we can get gone. More like that. So, but he's, bit by bit, he's moving south. And when he talks about the Negev, where is that? That's simply the Southland. I always thought that when they got down that far, I've seen pictures of the place, and it was awful. It's just bare hills, and they were rugged, and the deep gullies and ravines cut in them from flash floods, and that kind of stuff. Very little vegetation, and so on. But if you get to look back a little bit and accounts Well, no, there was enough there to support them and their herds. So the more modern look at this place is not right. It wasn't what he had, but he was still moving south. Then, verse 10, now there was a famine in the land. So this land wasn't real good, but don't get a picture of just, the Sahara Desert. Wasn't that. But it wasn't real reliable. We'll put it that way. And there was famine in the land. So, Abram's responsible for all these people. He is responsible for, one, his wealth, which is the welfare of his flocks and herds. That's a man's wealth. He could have pocket change besides that, but that was his base. And if your herd got in trouble, so were you. So there was famine in the land. So Abram went down to Egypt. Now talk about heading south. Now this is south. This is a couple hundred more miles south. So he went to Egypt to sojourn there. The word means, okay, I'm going to stay here, but this isn't, I know this is not permanent, but I'm going to be here for a while until whatever made me come has changed. It's like when Mary and Joseph went to Egypt with baby Jesus and sojourned there until God said, okay, Herod's dead, go back. So same idea. So Abram went down to Egypt to sojourn there, for the famine was severe in the land. It came about when he came near to Egypt that he had said to Sarai his wife, see now, I know that you are a beautiful woman. And when the Egyptians see you, they will say, this is his wife. And they will kill me. But they'll let you live. Please say that you're my sister, so that it may go well with me because of you, and that I may live on account of you. Well, you think Abram's a rat? Well, you rat. You would do this to your wife? There are a lot of dynamics here. Some assumptions that were made that were false. Assumptions oftentimes are. But, okay, was Sarai beautiful? What says she was? Yeah, she was drop dead gorgeous. Whoa. If they'd really looked at Sarai, they would have found more to that lady than appearance. She had a lot to her. There was some background to her. She took off from her home with her husband to go wherever. Abram, do you know where we're going now? No. Well, okay, I'm with you. And she stayed with him. And even though things weren't always good, she stayed with him. And now, a lot of ladies wouldn't take it on wouldn't take it if their husband said, we're kind of in a dicey situation here. I might have to throw you under the bus. Well, she'd been about 10 years younger than Abram, 65, and still gorgeous as you can imagine. Yep. Yeah. I kind of think she kept that that was the way God assembled her, and she was pretty. She stayed that way. Yeah. Okay. Abram made an assumption. He assumed that this Pharaoh in Egypt would see her beauty and do whatever was necessary to get her to be his. If it meant killing her husband. Yeah, he assumed that. So he does this. Now, incidentally, what was Sarah to Abram? Half-sister. So he didn't totally lie. But, you know, if you are married to your half-sister, what takes precedence there? Half-sister or marriage? Well, duh. Okay. All right. So Abram, he's assumed Pharaoh and Pharaoh's henchmen would take her away and do him in. But no, not for his sister. That way we'll work it out. As things came to be, Pharaoh's people did see Sarai, and yes, she caught their eye, and was then they were telling to Pharaoh what they saw and how they assumed it. And apparently Abram had said this, at least intimated somehow. So they got together. Long story is short, made. She got taken to Pharaoh. Abram, let this. And Pharaoh took her into his palace, paid a huge, looked like dowry for her. I'm sure it was anything he could afford, all right, but still he did. You know, if things aren't right in a household, how much trouble can take place? It happened here. It was God ordained. God bailed Abram out and kept Pharaoh from more trouble than he wanted, although he was I don't know. We read just a little more here and you'll see what goes on. Came about when Abram came to Egypt, the Egyptians saw that the woman was very beautiful. Pharaoh's officials saw her and praised her to Pharaoh, and the woman was taken into Pharaoh's house. Therefore, he treated Abram well for her sake and gave him sheep and oxen and donkeys and male and female servants and female donkeys and camels. But the Lord, he stepped in and helped Abram. But the Lord struck Pharaoh and his house with great plagues. I don't know what they were. They weren't water turned to blood, frogs, lice, and flies. That's coming later. But for now, great plagues. Because of Sarai, Abram's wife. Okay, we get that far in this. And here Pharaoh, all this trouble. And he's not stupid. He's trying to figure out what. This isn't usual. This is far and above. What? And you know, when something will happen, you first of all, you're wise if you'll try to figure out when did it start, and can I correlate that? And Pharaoh apparently did. He said, "Wait a minute. This all started when that beautiful lady came into my castle, my place." Now, incidentally, Pharaoh never touched that woman. Never did. That's not there. That did not happen. And that's where it was headed. Of course, she was going to be his wife. All right. But he got his head figured out there, and that's what he came up with. So, the Lord struck Pharaoh and his house with great plagues because of Sarai, Abram's wife. Then Pharaoh called Abraham and said, "Hey, what is this you have done to me? Why did you not tell me she was your wife? Abraham had assumed Pharaoh would have Abraham killed for Sarah and take her. He assumed wrong. Pharaoh was the innocence in this. All that was told to him was she's beautiful and yeah, she's available. She's this guy, this sheep herder's sister. And give him what he would like for a dowry, and she's yours.
I found it interesting. Abraham himself said, "Do this for me on account of you," and then it says farther down that it says the Lord struck Pharaoh and his household because of Sarah, not because of Abraham. I mean, he did it because of Sarah. He protects. He's going to protect Sarah through this whole thing. And, it just shows the first really sign of weakness of Abraham. To do this for me, Sarah. What husband I can't think of a husband who would think of that, who would do that. But there are some obviously out there.
But Jason, you lived a sheltered life. No, that's a valid point. That because when God stepped in, things changed. But the Lord struck Pharaoh and his house with the great plagues because of Sarah. Sarai, Abram's wife. Okay, now, Pharaoh called Abram and said, "What's this you've done to me? Why did you not tell me she was your wife? Why did you say she's my sister? So that I took her for my wife. Now then, here she is. Take her and go." And then he did this. He called his own guards and so forth, and he said, "Escort them out of the country." He could have done so much more. But God was in this. God was protecting Sarai, but Abram also, because he could have ended up losing his life. Pharaoh could have had a bad day and realized it all came because of Abram and said, "This is what we're going to do." But he didn't. He said, "Why did you not tell me she was your wife? Why did you say she's my sister?" So I took her for my wife. Now then, here's your wife. Take her and go. Pharaoh commanded his men concerning him, that is Abram, and they escorted him away with his wife and all that belonged to him. I want him and this beautiful sister wife and everything that he has, all that stuff I gave him. I don't want any of it back. I just want this sealed off and gone. So Pharaoh was a little bit ticked, don't you think? That's the way I'd portray him. Yeah, he was a little bit sore because Abram had not really acted in a forthright way as he should have. Okay, now, if anything like that ever happened to a guy, don't you think he'd really learn his lesson? He should. Did Abram? He didn't. We'll see later. It'll be a few chapters later, but it's later. Now, chapter 13. So Abram went up from Egypt to the Negev. Okay, things are better back at home. Well, what's going to be home? And he and his wife, doesn't say he and his sister, does it? He and his wife, and all that belonged to him, and Lot with him. The whole troop of them went back up to the Negev. Apparently Lot and all, they were all down there in Egypt. Now they're back. Now Abram was very rich in livestock, in silver and in gold. He went on his journeys from the Negev as far as Bethel to the place where his tent had been at the beginning between Bethel and Ai. So this is pretty much in the heart of the Promised Land, and where he had been told of God, I'm going to give you a bunch of land, a nation-sized piece of ground. So he went back up there. He says, to the place of the altar, this is verse 4, to the place of the altar which he had made there formerly, and where Abram called on the name of the Lord. Now, do you think he went back to a place where he had previously worshiped God and maybe wanting to reaffirm this with God after his little foray down to Egypt? Very possibly. And if you think I'm reading something in that isn't there, well, maybe. But this is where he went, and those were the memories he would have of that place. And it is mentioned that way. Verse 5, now Lot, who went with Abram, also had flocks and herds and tents. And the land could not sustain them while dwelling together, for their possessions were so great that they were not able to remain together. And there was strife between the herdsmen of Abram's livestock and the herdsmen of Lot's livestock. Now the Canaanite and the Perizzite were dwelling then in the land. See, just an aside, it's a comment, but this is not uninhabited turf. And they aren't the only frogs in the pond. And resources were just so much. And when Abram, and which was he was quite a force to be considered as far as support, and Lot, he was also, and the Canaanite, who were there first. You think maybe they were just themselves a little bit put upon? Yeah, I do. So, Abram said to Lot, please, let there be no strife between you and me, nor between my herdsman and your herdsman, for we are brothers. We're family here, and we've got to work this out. Is not the whole land before you? Please, separate from me. If to the left, then I'll go to the right, or if to the right, I'll go to the left. Lot lifted up his eyes and saw all the valley of the Jordan, that it was well watered everywhere. This was before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. It's said here then, and I have to just kind of make it say this, but it says that this land changed when Sodom and Gomorrah were destroyed. Because the very next phrase, like the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt as you go to Zoar. This place was beautiful. It was well watered. It grew stuff, and it was really fine. At this time, before Sodom and Gomorrah. Okay, so Lot chose for himself all the valley of the Jordan. And Lot journeyed eastward. Thus they separated from each other. Nothing more is said about separation. They just did it. Feelings, decisions, see you later, right? You know, we'll email, whatever. I don't know. But they, well, some I do, but they separated. Abram settled in the land of Canaan, while Lot settled in the cities of the valley and moved his tents as far as Sodom. Now, this word valley, it's interesting. I have a footnote. It says circle. Circle. And if you will look, if you were to look on a overhead map of that area, at the very south of the Dead Sea, that gets down to a very neck of water, very small neck of water, and below that is a large circle of water. And the literal word for valley here is circle. So it's thought that that's where Lot went, and there you go to find Sodom. And Sodom and Gomorrah, Reno Sparks, Eugene Springfield, and a lot of cities that are just together, and so on. So when they say Sodom, there you go. Now the men of Sodom were wicked exceedingly, and sinners against the Lord. That's called redundancy. Exceedingly wicked and sinners. Yes. Yes. Okay, you repeat yourself, but whatever, that is saying something and then underlining it. So the writer did that and did it well. The men of Sodom. Okay. The Lord said to Abram, after Lot had separated from him, now lift up your eyes and look from the place where you are, northward and southward and eastward and westward. You look all around you. You look everywhere. And this, how did the Lord talk to Abram? He's done it several times. How did he do it? I don't know. How could he have done it? Well, he did it in several ways through the times that he's visited with men, sometimes in dreams, sometimes an angel would appear, and he will end up doing that with Abram, and we know that. I don't know beyond that. I do know this. He did it, and so don't get hung up on it. So he did it. So the Lord said, in whatever fashion, to Abram, after Lot is separated from him, now lift up your eyes, look all around you, for all the land which you see, I will give it to you and to your descendants forever. Now, a man who has a family and is pleased to have descendants, then to have something like this said to you, you're going to have, your descendants are going to be well taken care of. Would be a very pleasant thing to have God tell you. Verse 16, and I will make your descendants as the dust of the earth, so that if anyone can number the dust of the earth, then your descendants can be numbered. Whoa. Arise, walk about the land through its length and breadth, for I'll give it to you. Then Abram moved his tent and came and dwelt by the oaks of Mamre, which are in Hebron, and there he built an altar to the Lord. Pretty much centrally located. And from there he could see a lot of land to remind him that, boy, my descendants will have all of this. This is wonderful. And the land was a good land. Now, sure, Lot chose the well-watered valley of the Jordan and the area around Sodom and Gomorrah. Does that mean that Abram kind of got the short end of the stick? No. This was a good land. So he moved his tent and dwelt by the oaks of Mamre in Hebron, and he worshiped God, thankful for what God had done for him. Now, We have Lot situated. We have Abram settled. And apparently, things were going well. We'll get more into Lot after a bit, but things were where Lot was. He had chosen wealth, and he had chosen the easy path in his mind. Abram is also his flocks and herds, his herdsmen, the people that were his servants now. He's doing well. Now, I'll just jump ahead a little bit in information. Abram, it's not just Abram and Sarah and a few servants. He has 319 men under arms in his little group. Fighting men. How many did he have altogether? I don't know. I can give you that number, 319, and support forces, whatever that took. So there's quite a few people there. Now, that's as we find it at the end of chapter 13. Chapter 14 starts, and it came about in the days of Amraphel, king of Shinar, Arioch, king of Elasar, Chedorlaomer, king of Elam, and Tidal, king of Goyim, that they made war with Bera, king of Sodom, with Bersha, king of Gomorrah, Shinab, king of Admah, and Shember, king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela, that is Zor. All these came as allies to the valley of Siddim, that is the Salt Sea. Okay, that's the Dead Sea. We have these kings, and today we give them a little different titles. Like say in World War II, we had the Axis and the Allies. These kings and these kings fighting, and back in those days we had these kings, and they're fighting, and one was subjugated to the other, and we're going to have a war. And we'll talk about that next week. They had a little fight. Thank you for your listening, and thank you for being here and sitting spaced out enough so nobody's going to get sick.